I want to start off by saying Happy Indigenous Peoples Day to everyone out there. And I was looking at in President Trump's proclamation on Columbus Day 2020, and it made me want to react to some of the thoughts that I'm going to share now. The fact of the matter is, his proclamation is really a nod, an acknowledgement to white supremacy in many different ways. And you have to really start to break that down to understand that. I mean, it's clearly simple. I mean, one of the things you have to realize that this proclamation has no mention of Native Americans anywhere in the proclamation. Native Americans are not mentioned. Another thing that we have to be mindful of is the fact that Columbus actually never made it to what is now known as North America. Yet President Trump, who touts his idea of America first, celebrating somebody who wasn't even from here. But what's the common factor? Whiteness. And so when there's no acknowledgement of Native Americans anywhere in the statement, we have to understand that, really at the end of the day, this is extremely dangerous and problematic. Because when he talks about what he's looking at in here, he talks about, oh, well, we're going to make sure that we have patriotic education. We're going to make sure that we stop the extremists from, teaching about racism and culturally sensitive education in our governments and in our schools. That is my line of work. That's actually what I do. I do trainings relating to anti-racism and critical race theory and how we can create communities where people are celebrated and not tolerated, and literally do it across the entire country and across the world. So when he talks about this extreme radical left, he's talking about people like me. And quite honestly, all we're doing is not about revising history. It's about painting an honest picture of history. I like what Dr. Ibram Kendi said when he said that one of his mentors told him, at the end of the day, you can't really be objective about history. So all you can really do is just tell the truth. And when you look at your history books and you look at my history books in terms of how we were taught about what happened in this world and things about Columbus Day and the like, we were taught another white savior story, which factually wasn't true. This man was a homicidal, genocidal, colonizing mentality mind who slaughtered so many people and introduced disease into so many of our native communities, slaughtering them physically as well as emotionally. And we need to acknowledge that. But what we have now is we have history books that want to say things like, people who are enslaved Africans were migrant workers. We want to say things like these Native American, our many Native American brothers and sisters willingly gave up their land. We want to say things like, they partnered together. We want to have these ceremonies of Thanksgiving when people sat down and broke bread and came together. And we got to start telling history. We got to start recognizing the facts, because if we don't recognize the facts at the end of the day, how do we expect other people, our next generation, to really be able to pass that on? And so when I see the work that people out there like Shaum is doing with Origination, and people like Tiffany Lofton's doing with the NAACP and the youth, we need to make sure that these stories get passed on and the history gets told properly. Because if we don't do it, if we don't teach the next generation how to be active and advocate for themselves, no one else is going to do it. And they're going to be in the school looking at the same old sorry history. This man is sitting here talking about in his proclamation about how Christopher Columbus was a great explorer, how he did all of these things for the Italian American community, and all. It's propaganda. And this is a man who's so desperate with his propaganda machine that he knows that his last ditch effort is to lean on white supremacy. Because as Lyndon Johnson said as president, he realized at a young age that if you could convince the poorest white man that he's better than the best colored person, he won't realize you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him someone to look down on and he will empty his pockets for you. This is what Trump has done. This is what he's playing on. And he's failed to, the people who support him fail to realize that many of them have more in common with black marginalized people or marginalized people in general than they do with wealthy politicians and so-called leaders like Mitch McConnell and Trump. We have to really understand that since in June, July, September, he's issued executive order after executive order. What does he say? I'm issuing executive order to, quote, root out the teaching of racially divisive concepts from the federal workplace, many of which are grounded in the same type of revisionist history that is trying to erase Christopher Columbus from our national heritage. Really? And then he says, together we must safeguard our history and stop this new wave of iconoclasm. You know he didn't write that. By standing against those who spread hate and division. We're not trying to spread hate and division. We're trying to spread love and information. We're trying to make sure that our history books are taught the truth about what happened, that it tells the whole picture. And so many times throughout history, people have been afraid to just tell the truth, as Malcolm said. Tell the truth. Tell the whole picture. Tell the whole story. You have to be able to realize that this is a president who will never want to do anything like that. And he's putting up and he's buttressing people who want to do the same thing, who want to continue with that revisionist history that puts white people at the top in the most pristine form, who did nothing but contribute to civilizations as opposed to destroy some of them as well, many of them. So if we want to talk truth, let's talk truth. And so I'm happy that I'm looking at my iPhone and other things, and people and Indigenous Peoples Day is just there. It's showing up, and people are talking about it all across the globe, and it's appearing on school calendars, because it's high time that we start telling the story of what happened to our Native American family, not from the perspective of the people who were on the boats, but from the perspective of the people who were already on the shores. So I say to everybody, happy Indigenous Peoples Day. Peace out.